All right, so welcome. Thank you for showing up and sticking around. This is I kind of put together a little presentation. Some of you may have not been into the parsonage for a while, so I've got some pictures to show. And then we got some information for you guys to see as far as breakdown of numbers of what our potential costs are going to be coming up. Okay, settle down, buddy. That's the parsonage. The outside is just a couple of weeks ago. One of the issues that has been brought up has been the parking issue. There's no room to add on for a garage and very limited parking out front for any multiple vehicles. I know things got fairly crowded for Pastor Jolene and her family when they had 3 vehicles out there. A minor issue, but it has been brought up. Main floor living room. This is the room where we'd be slotted to have carpet replaced before we had a new pastor in. Kitchen. Family room, master bedroom. Down into the basement. And the basement bedroom and the utility room. These are 2 things that whether we sell or we keep will be fixed before we would get a new pastor. This is some water damage that is above the back door, and then there's a broken window. And the cost to repair those is going to be about $900. I believe that is free labor from one of our parishioners as well. So if we were paying to have that done, it'd be quite a bit more than that, I would guess. House was built in 1974. We bought it in 1993. Estimated listing price $215. Although speaking with Jeremy this last week, he's actually more inclined to list it at $219 right now. Current cost per year. Utilities, maintenance, housing, specials, insurance. We do not pay property taxes for the house. In the past, lawn care and snow removal has been taken care of by the pastor and their family, but that is a potential additional cost depending on who comes to live there. Total per year for those maintenance, $10,641. If we were to sell and just give our incoming pastor a housing allowance, 30% of a base salary, not a whole lot more expense per year at this point, about $14,000. So maintenance that we would have to put into the house before the next pastor comes, painting labor, 15 gallons of paint roughly, install the window, new carpet, clean all the other carpets, and then repair the ceiling water damage, about $8,200. Whereas selling, the only things we would really have to do before we would sell it would be fix the window or install the window and repair that ceiling for about $900. This is kind of a breakdown of some of the repairs, purchases that have been made that are coming up. Microwave, range, and refrigerator, we're guessing we're done with that kitchen remodel back in 2000, so we're working with a 20-year-old microwave, range, and refrigerator. Those items are probably nearing their end of life. Garbage disposal, not a big expense or a need right now, but air conditioner also getting quite old. We don't have an estimate on how much that would cost to replace, but it's going to cost some money. Water heater, those numbers I know, the replacement price that has gone up in the last few months with the current climate of our economy. Siding, probably okay there for quite a while. Dishwasher. The big one that sticks out for me is the shingles. That's working on a 20-year-old roof. Depending on what they put on for shingles, we could be nearing the end of life with that roof. That could be a very large expense in the near future. Furnace, fairly new. Everything else, fairly new. But replacement costs for if we were to have to do all of those within the next 10 years, $13,000 to $18,000. So these are some of the questions that were brought up Wednesday night, so I'm just going to cover them, and then if you guys have any other questions or comments on that, we'll go from there. The big one that was brought up is what percentage will the realtor receive off the sale? 6%, which is pretty much the standard. Spoke with Jeremy Weeb Wednesday night, and he was very adamant that he has the church's interest in his best interest on his mind, and so if the sale price were not to go in that, okay, buddy, can you go down to mom, please? No. Yeah, go to mom, please. You're getting too wild. He said he would be willing to go down as low as 5% on his take for selling if the sale were to go lower, so that the church would retain some more money. Listing price, $215,000 to $219,000, less than 6%. We come out with about $202,000 to $205,000. He also said that as far as any other fees on the sale, there's only about $600 worth of legal fees on our end that would come out. Where will that money go with the sale? Some to tithing, and then the largest amount would go to support our general fund and investments, in hopes that most of the interest off of those investments would take care of that housing allowance. That's kind of our hopes. All those details and how much is going to go to where is still yet to be determined, and will depend on how much we get for the house. Somebody asked if we pay any taxes on the money earned in the sale. No, we do not. Somebody asked if having a parsonage isn't draw for an incoming pastor. Not really. A lot of it depends on the pastor, where they're at in their life, if they've got a family or if they're single. No kids or a lot of kids. That kind of ties in with, would the church be willing to, or will the church be purchasing a new parsonage in the future? Probably not. It's getting to be a lot more common to not have a parsonage. The cost to keep up the property is just an extra expense for the church that kind of puts a more financial strain on us right now. And the other thing is, having a house that fits every pastor's needs just really is not feasible. Pastor Jolene's family was really cramped in that house, and I do know that the Column Committee did interview a single gentleman, and he said, his comment was, "This is a lot of house for me." So having that house that's going to fit the right, we're not going to have the perfect parsonage for everybody. So, and that was the most of our discussion on Wednesday night. So I'll leave it to questions, comments, or concerns. Sell it. All right. Anybody have any questions? She's got a mic for you here.
I'd like to give a little history.
Yep.
I came as a child to this church in 1952, and I've seen the original church, the additions, selling off a parsonage, building a brand new parsonage. I've seen that parsonage sold off, go without, and then I've seen this one come back again. And it's not a new grand idea, because apparently in the past it didn't turn out quite like they thought it was either.
Okay.
That's all.
So that's kind of why we're here today, is just to have that discussion, as whether, I do know that the house I'm currently living in used to be the parsonage for the church, and it was sold off, and I know there was another one that was sold and moved out of town that was the parsonage too. I do know we have been through a couple of them. I guess the biggest thing is if our current parsonage is one that we want to keep, and that's kind of why we're here, to get all the information out with it right now and get everybody's thoughts and ideas as whether or not they think we should keep it or not. So, so far the general consensus has been, I think, overwhelmingly that we probably are better off without it, but that's why we will have a vote here eventually. We just wanted to get information out to anybody and get everybody's comments or concerns on it. So, if anybody else have anything to add? Val? Paulette, Val's got a...
Sorry, I took a little nap.
No, I guess my thought is, and I'm in favor of selling this, but I would like to see the majority of the funds invested just specifically for a housing allowance. I think if we add money to the general fund, we're letting us off. I mean, we have a responsibility to support our church, and I think we need to have the safety net of the housing allowance.
Yep, and that's been discussed. I don't know about the whole council, but between some of us, and there is some concern that our general fund may need a little bit of help until we can get people to continue to give and make sure that we're getting our bills paid. So that's why we had that in there, or added that in there, that there may be, some of that may be needed to help that general fund at this point.
Okay, I think I'm right on this, but like as being on the building committee or the property committee, we just get like one general fund for the parsonage and the church. And right now, I believe a lot of our money is going to the parsonage. So the things that need to be fixed on the church are kind of getting pushed to the side because it's been bigger bills that have been at the church, like windows and things like that. So I feel like a lot of our money is going to that and not to the church where it should be going, to fixing things here.
Amy, would you be able to elaborate on that more?
Is it the same?
So I don't know that it's a lot of money going to the parsonage. It's certainly not right now, it's utilities. But there are those things coming up, but this really echoes back. So I don't know that there's just a lot going to the parsonage that will shift into the general fund, but it is, and it's hard for me to say. I'm torn on the parsonage, to tell you the truth. I like the thought of having that parsonage because I know that the housing in the community right now, to get into a nice house is really expensive. So I'm torn on that, but yet I don't like that parsonage. I think it's kind of chopped up, and the parking is an issue for a family that comes in that has, teenage drivers. But as far as, are we spending a lot on that parsonage that we could be spending on repairs at the church? I don't think so. A lot of times when we start doing repairs, what we do is we ask for special money. So a lot of those bigger repairs don't actually come from the general fund, it comes from special giving. Does that answer your question?
Justin, I can't speak for the full call committee, but I know in my mind I'd hoped that we could wait with a decision on the parsonage until we call the pastor. Have you guys talked about that? What the timeline would be?
Not exactly the timeline. I know we do have to give, Kyle, how many weeks did you say it was that we would have to give before we could have a vote on it?
2 weeks.
So we'd have to,
and you could even have that vote at the same time as your pastor call.
okay. Yeah. So we would have to give at least 2 weeks notice for a vote, and then we'd have to go through those results and then make a decision as a council whether or not we would do that. Scott, you're not the only one who's brought that up. I do know people have brought that up, to me at least. I don't know about the rest of the council, as far as, do we is it possible for us to wait and see if, even if it would be selling that to the incoming pastor. One thing we are thinking about as far as selling sooner rather than later is the current market. Interest, as you know, Scott, interest rates are really low. It makes it, it's a seller's market right now. That could change very, very quickly in a matter of weeks to months. So that is the other thing to consider. We're not taking this decision lightly, and that's why we're trying to get everybody's input, and why we need to have these discussions. So, uh-oh.
For Pastor Kyle, looking kind of for a call, how is a parsonage, like how does that weigh in your decision?
For that, oh, this is loud. A parsonage usually is really good for somebody like me. Young, first call, haven't really had another job. But if you're trying to go for anybody that doesn't have a job, or that is coming from another call, or has had a job before they decided to go to seminary, a parsonage is usually not ideal. A lot, especially like Justin said, if they have a family or anything, they want something that fits their family. But for me, a parsonage is as I looked for calls, a parsonage was a draw because I don't have the funding to buy a house in any way. But at the same time, you know, if I look for another call in 10, 20 years, whatever, a parsonage would probably not be a draw. So I don't know if that answers your question, but.
All right. Anybody else? Nope.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. What's the cost of the upgrading for the parsonage going to be as far as? I come late, so I didn't know what those figures were. I know it probably needs more than a Band-Aid.
Right. So $8,200 is what we'd have to do about. Some of those costs may have gone up. I know probably wouldn't affect us much in town, but I do know some of those cleaning services, they are talking about increasing their prices especially because of the way gas prices are right now. It's getting more expensive for them to get their cleaners and more expensive for them to operate. So, but that's what we would have to do before the next pastor would come. And then these future replacements or repairs are things that I would say the top of the list is probably the most likely things that are to be needed replacing in the future. That may pop up within the next 10 years. These ones on this page a little less likely, but still things to keep in mind as far as what may need replacing. I would say the furnace on down, probably nothing to be concerned about at this point in time, but these other things are starting to get some age on them where we may have to replace or repair.
What's the cost to fix it so it's sellable? You know, I mean, a bank will, you know, they'll assess it and say
$900. Replace a window and fix the ceiling.
That's it. Okay.
That's it. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Can I just add one thing about the housing allowance also? When this came up at council, Kyle was sharing with us that what we have on there, I believe it's 30%,
Oh, yes.
right?
Yes, right there.
Okay, so that is the required minimum. We may actually end up doing a bit over 30% depending on our market in town, because we want our pastor to come in and be able to afford housing. So just keep in mind, we've got 14,000 down. Could be a little bit more than that.
Yep.
And it also depends on the base salary. This is base salary for a pastor that has been pastoring for 10 to 15 years, I believe.
So, as Kyle had brought up, with this 30%, it may be in the contract, we may list that 30% base salary or a minimum of 14,000, because a brand new pastor is not going to be making that 46,000, and a housing allowance of $14,000 or of less than 14,000 is not going to get them a very nice place to live in. So.
And the housing equity goes based on salary as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for those of you who didn't hear, the pastor's housing equity is also based on salary. Is that all making sense? I'm seeing a few head nods. Okay. All right.
What do you estimate 200,000 will give you for money toward the 200,000 roughly? What's your guess on what that interest will give you toward the housing?
No idea yet. That, though we haven't gotten a chance to break those. This was a pretty quick decision as far as bringing up these discussions, so we haven't gotten time to sit down and look into that investment and percentage and everything. But if, 1% on $100,000 is going to give us an extra $1,000 a year. I would hope we would get more than a 1% return on our investment. So, we could be looking at somewhere, I would hope anyways, in that $6,000 to $8,000 extra a year on just investments. But that all depends a lot on how and how much we invest. So, but, looking at these numbers, hopefully we could get more, but if at the very least making up that difference as far as what we're paying now, really getting rid of the parsonage versus keeping it, if we get rid of it, should only cost us $4,000 to $5,000 more a year. So we want to at least get that $4,000 to $5,000 more out of the investments, and hopefully as a congregation we can continue our giving to maintain that $10,064 for the housing allowance. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Anybody else? No, yeah.
The business of a house of God, a worship center, should not be in the housing business.
All right. Well, if anybody doesn't have anything else, I think we'll just kind of leave it at that. I think we've got some good comments, and thank you all for showing up.